there's just not enough evidence to say that we're actually making progress here with the Biden administration, with the Pete Buttigieg Transportation Department. It's absurd.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
This is really a story where your brain is just gonna get broken if you only look at the world through like your partisan political allegiances.
Right.
Like
if you just want to hear the conservative take or the liberal take, the Republican or Democrat take, you're missing out a lot.
Yeah, it's just going to totally break you're going to have no reference with which to actually understand what's going on, because the reality of the situation is that both sides, even though really it's like one side in more instances than not, but both parties are at fault here. And if you can't understand that, you're not going to understand the problem, and then therefore you're not really going to be able to understand what needs to happen to go forward. And we're seeing this. I saw this on conservative radio last week. Yaffe was trying to make the case, it did not do it very convincingly, that lack of regulation did not cause this. That actually, no, this is just a freak accident, and there's really not much to worry about, and it's there's nothing that the government can do. It's just really out of our hands. This is just nature. This is
that's
the
just
world.
such
and
bullshit.
It's just so silly. It's really, really silly. And then on
we
the
can
other
drop
side,
bombs on
right.
countries halfway across the planet. Supposedly, we can target an individual in some village somewhere and kill him, but not his goats. We're supposed to trust that the government can do that.
Yeah.
But you can't prevent rail disasters in 2023.
Yeah. And then on the other side, you've got Buttigieg trying to make this seem like this is all Trump's fault. And like he has his hands are tied. It's so bizarre. Conservatives, their brains are just broken. They have no idea how to understand that. But also these partisan weirdos like Pete Buttigieg have no idea how to understand what's going on here either. So let's take a look at this clip from Buttigieg in East Palestine. The day after Trump, by the way, just the optics of that are insane. How is it that how do you let that happen?
Right. You mean allow Trump to visit the town before either Pete or Biden?
Yeah. How do you let that happen? That's
Biden
insane.
still hasn't shown up, and my understanding is he has no plans to, but Pete did finally show up afterwards, after Trump was there handing out Big Macs.
Yeah. So let's take this let's take this and we will we're going to listen to this clip from Pete Buttigieg where he's really kind of subtweeting Trump. And so we'll play this clip and then we'll react to it.
If the same people who want to come here and play political games are the same people who sided with industry again and again and again and watered down rail regulations again and again and again, I want to see where they've had an actual change of heart or not. And if they had a change of heart, I'll take them at their word and we can get work done. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, this is fair enough if you are doing stuff and there's just not enough evidence to say that we're actually making progress here with the Biden administration, with the Pete Buttigieg Transportation Department. It's absurd.
Right. I mean, that statement would irritate me a little bit less if before this disaster, the administration had already proposed reversing Trump's deregulation, right? If the administration had already proposed adding additional censors that could have prevented this disaster, if they were already working towards enforcing more regulations, beefing up the regulations in place, that would be different. It would be different if that was already in place, but it's not, right? From as far as we can tell, there's been absolutely nothing done by the administration in terms of rail safety and rail regulations until this disaster. And, it's day late, dollar short on this disaster so far. Now, to Infinite Content's point in his call earlier, the EPA has put out some strong statements and, says they're going to make Norfolk Southern pay for it. We'll see. We'll see. I mean, color me a little bit skeptical, honestly.
Yeah.
But I guess, again, that's better late than never. Glad to see that they're taking that posture now. But, for Mayor Pete to call on Trump and the Republicans to, join him.
Right.
You haven't convinced your own party yet, brother.
Right.
Like,
yeah, well, and so
has
let's play
Biden
this.
put out a statement yet?
Right. So let's play this where he gets more explicit. A reporter says basically what I said, you're basically kind of subtweeting Trump. What's your message to him? And makes him state it explicitly. So let's play that and see what he says.
You mentioned a national political figure who's decided to get involved. It sounds like you're talking about Trump. And then you said, I need your help. How can he help?
Well, one thing he could do is express support for reversing the deregulation that happened on his watch. I heard him say he had nothing to do with it, even though it was in his administration. So if he had nothing to do with it, and they did it in his administration against his will, maybe he could come out and say that he supports us moving in a different direction. We're not afraid to own our policies when it comes to raising the bar on regulation. And I've got to think that him indicating that this is something that everybody, no matter how much you disagree on politics and presidential campaigns, can get behind. Higher fines, tougher regulations on safety, Congress untying our hands on braking rules, all the other things that go with that. That'd be a nice thing for him to do.
Yeah, so do it.
Right. It's like I was telling you last night. I do understand the politics behind it. And in fact, I don't even necessarily disagree with that approach. But it rings hollow
When you're not doing anything.
when you're not doing anything, when your own party
Yeah.
needs to follow the advice you're given to Trump, right? I don't see a groundswell of, regulatory zeal coming from the Biden administration or the Democrats in Congress.
Right.
If it's out there, I have missed it. But you can't sit around, twiddle your thumbs for a couple years, then show up after the big disaster, late, and act as if, this happened because of Trump, and Trump could really do us a solid and call for better regulations and call for things to get better. Of course he could. And you know what? He'll probably say it.
Right.
He'll say the exact opposite probably 20 minutes later. But yeah, they probably can get him to go on the record to say something like that or to that effect. But yeah, that's what bothers me is.
Yeah, well, Adam, look, let's cut him a break because he's got a reason why he hasn't done anything yet. And he explains it here in this press conference. So let's play this clip.
But also, Norfolk Southern and the other freight rail companies need to stop fighting us every time we try to do a regulation in order to hold them accountable and their other railroad companies accountable for their safety record. And what we've seen is industry goes to Washington and they get their way. They got their way on the ECP rule. They got their way on a Christmas tree of regulatory changes that the last administration made on its way out the door in December of 2020. I think they're getting their way on the fines being too low. I'm sorry, but if the biggest fine we can charge on a violation is $250,000 or less, and that's an egregious hazmat violation to get somebody killed, that is not enough for a multi-billion-dollar company. Well, we're acting on it with the authorities we have and calling on members of Congress to act on it with the authorities they have, and the railroads not to wait on us to require them to do the right thing on their own.
Yeah, well, see, there you go, Adam. I mean, he can't do anything because the companies aren't letting him hold them accountable. So, what can you do, right?
Yeah, and, I'm glad Infinite Content brought up the McKinsey connection. I mean, because this is a gentleman who was literally paid significant sums of money to help companies figure out how to beat regulations. right? To help companies figure out how to do exactly what he's describing, to go to Washington and win. And that happened under Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah.
The transportation industry, the rail industry has been deregulated over the course of more than 5 decades now. Right? We can go back to Jimmy Carter's administration. So it's just really hollow. Yeah, you're right, Pete. The companies are going to fight you on regulations. That's how this works. I'm glad you've stumbled upon that realization that all of us who are more than like 5 years old already knew. And which you damn well know because you've been on the other side of it your whole career. Yeah, I am very just, and I know we're about to get to this, the other piece of this here is that the Democratic circles and some of the liberal press has gone on a new track where the problem is everyone's being unfair to Pete.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the tragedy.
Right.
Is that poor Pete is getting blamed for all of these things out of his control. He's being blamed for the former administration's deregulation and all this and that. And, you know, I just think that's so absurd. The man is a cabinet secretary. You've been a cabinet secretary since the beginning of the administration.
Yeah.
You knew the supposed Christmas gift in December 2020. You knew all about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It happened right before you got there. Had to have been first on your list of what, you know, of your onboarding process. You certainly knew what you were doing by busting the rail strike or the potential rail strike this winter, right? Seems to me like Norfolk Southern and the rest of the carriers won big. They won big in part because of Pete and Marty Walsh and Joe Biden and the Democrats and Republicans in Congress. So, yeah, I don't want to hear any whining coming from the Pete Buttigieg camp that he's being, you know, unfairly maligned or, you know, his clear ambitions that he has may be dampened by this disaster and the pushback he's getting. I mean, why? I know this is just optics, but yeah, why is it that Donald Trump rolled his fat ass up there to hand out Big Macs before you got there? Why?
Insane.
Why?
Right.
You couldn't send the transportation secretary there?
Yeah, and you know the thing is,
you know, Biden had to be in Ukraine supposedly. I'm not
but
even
he
going
had
to touch
2
that.
weeks before that.
Right.
He had 2 or 3 weeks before that he could have done the thing.
Absolutely.
And you know the thing, like, part of me wants to say, obviously this is theater. Like, nothing materially changes from Biden being there physically. Okay, we understand that and we recognize that, especially when, you know, right-wing freaks talk about how Biden hasn't visited the border. Like, what the hell do you want him to do at the border? Like, that doesn't even mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. And so, you know, there's a part of me that wants to recognize that and wants to have that as the forward-facing thing. But also, the thing that I've come to is the forward-facing thing is that, okay, maybe we can accept that it's theater, but that's your freaking job is theater. You're supposed to be, you know, that's half of your thing is being theater for the right message, right? You can have plays that have a good message and that encourage people to act and that do things that are real, but so you got to engage in the theater. And he's not doing that. Trump's doing that and Biden's not doing that. It's crazy. But the Buttigieg world is very much in this whole thing about, oh, poor Buttigieg. And he even enlisted the official Department of Transportation Twitter account in this campaign of poor Buttigieg, poor Department of Transportation. And former guest Julia Rock at the Lever News broke that down a little bit. And so I wanted to play that for you.
The Department of Transportation started like fighting with the Lever's Twitter account on Twitter. We adhere to the highest standards of journalistic ethics. And so we, of course, reached out to the Department of Transportation for comment on the story, incorporated their comment, and the Transportation Department started attacking our story on Twitter as false, without providing any, evidence that the story was false or what was false about the story. Didn't ask for any corrections on the story, which would sort of be the typical way a government agency might claim that there's something false in the story. And then was responding to Twitter accounts that had responded to our story that had 9 followers, sort of calling them out for, misunderstanding the Department of Transportation's response to the accident. I've never really seen anything like this from a federal agency's Twitter account before.
And for some reason, I don't know why she didn't include this in the thing. Maybe she wants her podcast to be more professional than the Department of Transportation was being on Twitter. But that account with 9 followers, the username was Cupcake Boner. So Cupcake Boner holding the Department of Transportation accountable.
Wow.
Very funny.
Yeah, and that's bizarre to me. Come on now. You got more to deal with right now than arguing with Cupcake Boner 69 on Twitter.
Yeah.
That seems bizarre. But on that note, I really, really am appreciative of Julia Rock and all of the folks at the Lever News. The Lever News has really been all over this.
Yeah.
They have put out some quality journalism. They are digging into the backstories. They're digging into, what are the conflicts of interest here, both with the Democrats and the Republicans. As I mentioned earlier, this pretty new article about Governor DeWine, right? I mean, this guy has received significant sums of money from Norfolk Southern. They have helped his career tremendously.
Yeah.
So, I give credit to the Lever News. I think they have helped to shift the narrative around this and help to obviously, the DOT is doing damage control, and that's in part because of their reporting.
Yeah, and and some people have mentioned this on Twitter and on some other YouTube shows, but this is, the response to this has really been driven by independent media or not mainstream media on the left and the right, because the main, Fox News hasn't really picked this up. CNN, MSNBC, that there are all of these, the big alphabet channels are really kind of late to the game. And it's been, outlets like the Lever News doing the real reporting where if you actually want to figure out what's going on, you want to go to the Lever, right?
Right.
But also you've got, right-wing weirdos on radio trying to convince people that it's Antifa or something, or that but they're talking about it. And then some people on more Democrat partisan type stuff talking about this too. So, that's interesting about the media landscape, that independent media, not mainstream media, has been able to create this reaction. Got a super chat from Straw McCallum in the chat saying, parties of the proprietary class doing proprietary class politics and engaging in sparring club kayfabe. And that's, that kayfabe is really a great way to describe what's been going on here.
Yeah,
so.
that absolutely. I think there's a reason why there's a crossover in politics and professional wrestling sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Even right here in Huntsville, Alabama.
Yeah, for sure.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.